When preparing for Aliyah from the United Kingdom, your birth certificate requirements represent one of the most fundamental, yet complex aspects of the documentation process, involving not just obtaining the correct document, but ensuring it meets specific Israeli standards, timing requirements, and authentication procedures that can significantly impact your application timeline and success. The Israeli Ministry of Interior requires your original birth certificate issued by the country where you were born, and this document must include both of your parents' names listed clearly and completely. This requirement is non-negotiable and cannot be satisfied through alternative documentation such as marriage certificates, baptismal records, or other forms of identity proof. The birth certificate serves as the foundational document that establishes not only your identity and place of birth, but also the crucial parental connections that may be essential for proving your Jewish lineage under the law of return. For your Aliyah application submission, you must provide a copy of this original birth certificate, but the document itself must undergo apostille certification through the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office before it can be accepted by Israeli authorities. The apostille process authenticates your birth certificate for international use, essentially providing governmental verification that the document is genuine and issued by legitimate UK authorities. This apostille certification typically costs £30 and takes 2 to 3 weeks to complete, though expedited services are available for urgent situations. The requirement for both parents' names to be listed on your birth certificate creates particular challenges for some applicants, as older UK birth certificates or those issued under special circumstances may not include complete parental information. If your birth certificate does not include your parents' names, you must obtain what's called a long-form birth certificate from the General Register Office, which provides more comprehensive information than standard short-form certificates. This process can add several weeks to your timeline and additional costs, but it's essential because Israeli authorities use parental information to verify Jewish lineage claims and cross-reference with other family documentation. Hospital-issued birth certificates, regardless of how official they may appear, are not sufficient for Aliyah purposes and will be rejected by Israeli authorities. Only birth certificates issued by official government registrars, such as the General Register Office in England and Wales, or equivalent authorities in Scotland and Northern Ireland, meet the requirements. Some applicants mistakenly assume that hospital certificates with official-looking seals and signatures will be acceptable, only to discover they must restart the process with proper governmental documentation. Name discrepancies between your passport and birth certificate require additional documentation to establish the connection between your current legal name and your birth name. If your name has changed due to marriage, divorce, adoption, or legal name change, you must provide official documentation of each name change with proper apostille certification. These documents create a paper trail that allows Israeli authorities to verify that the person on the birth certificate is indeed the same person applying for Aliyah, even if names differ across documents. The timing of obtaining your birth certificate and apostille certification requires careful coordination with your overall Aliyah timeline, as these documents have practical expiry considerations, even though birth certificates themselves don't technically expire. Israeli authorities expect documentation to be reasonably current, and apostille certifications more than 2 to 3 years old may face additional scrutiny or requests for renewal. Planning to obtain these documents within 12 to 18 months of your planned Aliyah ensures they remain current throughout the application process. If your birth certificate is in a language other than English or Hebrew, you must submit a copy of a notarized translation into English or Hebrew, along with a copy of the original certificate. The translation must be completed by a certified translator, and the translation itself must be notarized to verify its accuracy and completeness. This adds both time and cost to the process, particularly for documents in languages that require specialized translators familiar with legal and governmental terminology. The practical challenge of obtaining UK birth certificates varies significantly depending on whether you have the General Register Office Index reference number for your birth registration. With the reference number, the process takes approximately 10 minutes online and costs £12.50, with certificates delivered within 4 working days. Without the reference number, you must pay an additional £3.50 for each search, and certificates are sent 15 working days after application. For urgent situations, priority service costs £38.50 and delivers certificates the next working day if ordered by 4 p.m. Birth certificate requirements extend to all family members, making Aliyah, including children, regardless of age. Each family member needs their own original birth certificate with apostille certification, which means families must coordinate multiple document requests and apostille applications simultaneously. The cost and administrative burden multiply with family size, requiring careful budgeting and timeline management to ensure all family members' documentation is ready simultaneously. For families where children were born outside the UK, additional complexity arises as birth certificates must be obtained from the countries where the children were born, each with their own documentation and apostille procedures. Some countries have more complex or time-consuming processes for obtaining certified birth certificates or equivalent apostille certifications, requiring extended planning and potentially different timelines for different family members. The security and storage of your apostilled birth certificate becomes crucial, given its importance throughout the Aliyah process and beyond. The apostilled original serves multiple purposes during immigration and settlement, from opening Israeli bank accounts to registering children for school, and replacing lost apostilled documents requires repeating the entire process from the beginning. Many families choose to obtain multiple certified copies before apostille certification, allowing them to have backup documents available while using originals for official purposes. Document verification procedures by Israeli authorities may include cross-referencing your birth certificate information with other submitted documents, checking for consistency in names, dates, and parental information across your entire application package. Any discrepancies, even minor ones like different spellings of names or date formats, can trigger requests for additional documentation or clarification that delay processing times. The birth certificate requirement becomes particularly complex for adopted individuals, as the relationship between birth certificates and Jewish lineage may involve additional documentation about biological parents or adoption procedures. Israeli authorities typically require information about biological parents for Jewish lineage verification, which may necessitate obtaining original birth certificates that show biological parent information rather than amended certificates that show adoptive parents. For individuals born in territories that were formerly British but are now independent countries, determining the correct authority for obtaining birth certificates and apostille certification can be complicated. Some territories maintain records through British systems, while others have established independent documentation procedures that require different processes and potentially different apostille or legalization requirements. Financial planning for birth certificate requirements should include not just the basic certificate costs, but also apostille fees, potential translation costs, shipping expenses for international applications, and expedited service fees if timing becomes urgent. For a family of 4, the combined costs of obtaining birth certificates and apostille certifications can easily exceed £200, and this should be factored into overall Aliyah budgeting alongside other documentation expenses. The administrative timeline for birth certificate acquisition and apostille certification often represents the longest single component of document gathering for Aliyah applications. From initial application to receiving apostille documents can take 4 to 8 weeks under normal circumstances, longer during peak periods or if complications arise. This timeline often determines the earliest possible submission date for Aliyah applications, making birth certificate acquisition one of the first priorities in the preparation process. Storage and backup strategies for apostille birth certificates should consider both immediate needs during the Aliyah process and long-term requirements for life in Israel. Digital scans stored securely online provide backup access to document information, while physical storage should protect against loss, damage, or theft. Some families maintain apostilled originals in safety deposit boxes or fireproof storage while using certified copies for routine purposes during the application process. Professional consultation becomes valuable when birth certificate situations involve complications such as missing parental information, historical name changes, adoption circumstances, or births in territories with unclear documentation procedures. Immigration lawyers specializing in Aliyah applications understand how to address documentation challenges and can often suggest alternative approaches or additional supporting documentation that satisfies Israeli requirements even when standard procedures face obstacles. The long-term importance of properly apostilled birth certificates extends beyond the initial Aliyah application to numerous aspects of life in Israel, from proving identity for various governmental procedures to establishing family relationships for inheritance or other legal purposes. The investment in obtaining proper documentation at the outset prevents complications and additional expenses later when these documents may be needed for various official purposes in Israeli society. Understanding birth certificate requirements thoroughly and planning for their acquisition early in the Aliyah preparation process ensures that this fundamental documentation supports, rather than delays, your immigration timeline, while providing the solid foundation of verified identity and family relationships that Israeli authorities require for processing your application efficiently and accurately.